One. I'm Sue, and I'm from the Ron Joyce. I'm a behavior therapist, and here to try and help you a little bit tonight.
Yeah, and I'm Michelle. I'm a child life specialist. I've been working with Hamilton Health Sciences for over 20 years. So we are here to support you. We are not here as clinicians, so this information will help the general population. We can't get too much into your individual situation, but again, if you have questions, you want to clarify any of the information, just put it in the chat box.
So why won't they listen? So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about some ways to cope with your child's negative feelings. We're going to learn how to express your feelings in a positive way. We're going to try to understand what might be behind your child's behavior and use some alternatives to punishment and resolve family conflicts a little more easily and maybe hopefully find some alternatives to saying no.
So in general, these strategies work well. They are parenting strategies that give the message to your child, this is what is expected of you, and I'm paying attention to the good things. So when you pay attention to something that you like, you're going to see more of it. Ignore behavior you want to see less of. And of course, if it's a safety concern, like they're hurting you, they're hurting themselves, or they're breaking something, you can't ignore that. But when we give more attention to the good behavior, we tend to see more of it. And rewarding and just paying attention is reward enough for some children, noticing the effort, but you can add a caught being good jar, a checklist to keep track of the things that they're doing, adding a reward chart. That gets your kids doing more. So these are some of the basic things that you may be trying and are working, or maybe they're not working, and that's why you're here, because we're going to talk about some other things.
So effective communication is we're looking at, communicating with a child that, needs to happen in the same room. So we're not trying to communicate when we're getting dinner ready and they're in the playroom and we're just trying to so what was that? What happened today? Tell me about this, tell me about that. Um, doesn't work, right? So we need to be present and we're not talking about that sort of in your face kind of communication either, because that's really awkward and uncomfortable for anybody. So when we talk about eye contact sometimes, it really doesn't necessarily fit with productive communication because it just actually can really feel like it puts a person on the defensive. Because if somebody's kind of like coming into your sort of personal space and kind of really sort of getting in your face and like trying to be like, yes, yes, tell me more, it feels like, can you just back away a little bit? It feels very uncomfortable. And a lot of kids don't do well with that kind of eye contact and, wanting to be too warm and fuzzy. So just have some sort of just natural space, conversations with your kids, being in the same area, sort of that side by side, or maybe sort of stepping back, observing, sort of maybe standing behind them, noticing what it is they're doing, having that sort of conversation just in the general same space where they are, can be much better and kind of just getting down to their level. Sort of within earshot is probably a little bit better than that eye contact sort of um, awkwardness. And making sure that you're using language that the child understands, is and that it's age appropriate, right? And when we say age appropriate, it's to where their developmental level is at. So if you have a 9-year-old that is actually functioning more as a 7-year-old, you want to think about using language that a 7-year-old would understand and comprehend, right? And you don't want to be like, well, you're 9, you should get it, right? You want to make sure that you're fitting your tone and your language to that of a 7-year-old if that's where they're functioning at. And remember, they are not little adults. their brains are still functioning and do not fully develop until the age of 25. So there's lots of stuff that's happening in there. So they are not going to be processing things the same way as you. So we have to be trying to give them pauses and time to sort of get what it is that we're saying. Okay.
So, any ideas? And you can just put this in the chat. When I say something like, can you pick up your toys? Maybe you can finish the game later. Don't you think it's time to get ready? What's going on with these messages? What is the message I'm sending by saying these things to my child? Just put it in the chat.
You actually said that very nicely too, Michelle.
Did I?
Because that can make a difference too in terms of how it's delivered.
Exactly. So when I say, can you pick up your toys? What is the message I'm saying when I say, can you pick up your toys?
So are these demands? What you're doing is less important than what I want. Yeah. Optional demands.
And there it is. It's optional. You're giving a choice. Can you pick up your toys? So people are thinking that that's a polite way to say things.
Yeah.
And I
So
am
you're
asking.
kind of asking. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you pick up your toys? I am asking. So the child can say, no, I can't pick up my toys. You pick them up. And then we think they're being defiant. Maybe you can finish the game later is giving a choice. Maybe. No. So we do this because we think we're being polite or it's a little nicer. And then we give the child a choice when there is no choice. So are they not listening, or are we giving them a choice and we're just not happy with the choice that they've gotten? So being mindful of that. Okay. So there's no okay. You don't say, can you pick up your toys? 5 more minutes, then it's time to pick up your toys. That kind of thing. So we're
Yeah.
being clear.
Don't give the choice if there's not a choice to be had, right? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. One more slide, and then it's time to leave. That's it. As soon as you say, all right, you're asking permission or you're giving a choice.
So some various ways that parents respond to children, and these are not, necessarily always helpful, is sometimes we ignore their feelings and it's that, fluffing them off. You're fine, stop worrying about it. Or sometimes we fly in and we're in that fix it mode. Oh, you should have, or why don't you do this? And we're trying to make it all better for them. Or we go into pity party mode and it's like, oh, poor baby, come here, let's have a cookie, let's go watch a movie, let's have that snuggle. And, so those are sort of three very common sort of parental or caregiver responses that are not always necessarily helpful. Not that they don't necessarily provide some soothing, but not necessarily helpful. Okay.
And I think the whole piece is, with this workshop is why aren't they listening? But are we actually listening to them? Because if you ignore their feelings and saying you're fine, when I'm not feeling fine, now I'm going to melt down even bigger. So you hear me, right? And then again, we're having that disconnect between parent and child. And other ways parents respond, little adult syndrome, better. We've gone over this before, and a lot of times is it that they won't or they can't? Children are struggling. And is it that they're not listening to us or our expectations? Do they need to be altered? Like Sue said earlier, you've got a 9-year-old functioning more like a 7-year-old. And then maybe, when your child isn't listening, maybe doing things that you think they should have known better, then we start thinking about the other person. Well, what did the teacher say? Or how did the other child feel? And it's kind of like, no one's listening to me, yet I'm expected to be listening to everybody. So you want to go back and forth, and support the child and hear them. And I do like the last comment from when we were talking about, keeping it short and sweet, to make sure you use less words. So that is a great tip by one of the parents, because we talk too much, and then the child is not going to listen to us because we're
They
talking way
shut you
too
off.
much. Yeah, and they switch you off. Exactly.
So I really like some of these alternative solutions here, right? So, instead of the half listening and the giving advice and denying their feelings and trying to use logic and the fixing it, here are some other things that you can try to do, right? So, give them your full attention, right? So again, that's that sort of like moving in, not getting too close, but just that moving in and giving them that full attention and validation, right? So I mean, we talk about that on number 5, but it's that you're moving in and you're sort of preparing and getting ready to provide that validation for their experience, and they know, I've got you, right? You've got their attention, and respond, right? Give that sort of body language, a bit of a workout, and start to practice using that in a little bit more of an effective way. Give that nod, right? Give that acknowledgement that, yes, uh-huh, right? Use those kinds of things. Name the feelings for them. A lot of kids really struggle with sort of that awareness of identifying emotions, and they really struggle with sort of that vocabulary of emotions. So sometimes you may need to help them to sort of name the emotion. They can't figure out how to tame an emotion if they can't identify what it is in the first place. And we want to take them away from just the basics of mad, sad, glad, and bad, which is great when you're, 2 and 3 years old, but we want to start to broaden that out a little bit more as they get older and let them have a bigger repertoire of emotion. So we may have to try to start to help them with that, to sort of build that vocabulary a little bit. And once they start to learn how to name the emotion, then we can start to build in some strategies to try and tame it. And sometimes we just have to let it go. We don't always have to jump in. We don't always have to use the logic. We can sometimes let things go. Is it always that important? If it's safety, absolutely. We have to jump in. We have no choice. When it's a safety concern or a safety issue, it's just not even on the table. It has to be dealt with. But there are some things. And what are those things that you're comfortable letting go? And maybe you need to sort of make a sort of a mental list for yourself, because sometimes we jump when it's got nothing necessarily to do with what the kids have just done, but it's the 5 or 6 other things in our day that have pushed our buttons. And then our kids do that one more thing that just push us over the top. And is that really necessarily fair to them that we've reacted the way that we have? So sometimes we need to sort of take our foot off the gas and recognize, is it really what they've done, or is it sometimes a lot of the other things that have gone on in our day? So sometimes we need to let it go. And matching that emotion to help them to validate their struggle and their experience doesn't mean that we have to say it was okay to hit somebody or whatever. That's a whole different subject. But validation of their emotional experience is is something that helps them feel heard, and you're going to have a much deeper, richer communication, and you're going to build that relationship with your child, and they're going to want to come to you. They're going to want to talk with you. They're going to want to share things with you if they're knowing that you're receptive, right? So this is something that really has to be developed over time, and you have to practice doing this. You have to get comfortable with feeling emotion, expressing emotion, and matching that with your child.
So from the things that we've just talked about, How would you address some of these statements? So the first thing is the bus driver yelled at me. So thinking back to what we've just said, we want to maybe jump in and fix, but what can we do instead? Yeah, ask how they feel.
Yep.
Wow. Do you feel, you can even label, like Sue said before, I can see that you feel frustrating, or that must have been frustrating. How are you feeling about that? That is going to start opening up the conversation, because what we want to say is why, what happened, what did you do? And then the child doesn't feel heard, and then we can't really get them to open up and really figure out what is going on there, right? So what about no one passes me the puck. I want to quit hockey.
There's lots of thought going on about this one, eh?
Mhm.
This could actually become a very black and white situation too. Like if they were to say, no one ever passes me the puck, it could become a very black
Mhm.
and white situation, a very black and white thinker.
Yeah.
Wow, you
Yeah,
really
that's
want to have a chance to play the puck. I love that.
yeah. So I would
That's
just
so
want to finish
frustrating.
read that out loud, Sue, so we
Hmm.
can have that recording.
Wow, you really want to have a chance to play the puck, and they aren't letting you do it. That's so frustrating. I love
Yeah,
that.
that's perfect. So the child feels heard. And when the child feels heard, then they can start calming down a little bit, and they may come up with their own problem solving. We don't need to fix everything for them.
Mm.
So what you're doing is you're fixing. So you want your child, we want to practice, we want to do things. And sometimes I think it's just validating the fact that it's really frustrating. That must be really hard. Um, is there anything that you think you could change, or do you even have to get into that? Is it that they're not listening? Is it something that they can do their own problem solving with, or do we have to fix it? Sometimes I think it's just a matter of validating, and things will work it out. But if they're not listening, and all we do is jump in with solutions, and we feel like if you just listen to me and you do it this way and you do it that way, they may feel like no
Yeah,
one really knows where I'm coming from, and you're just flooding me with your ideas. And those children that are a little more rigid, they're like, no, you're not listening to me. This is your
yeah.
idea. I want to do it. right? So this is that push and pull that
Hey,
sometimes happens.
yeah. I just wanted to caution about the overuse of the word sorry.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we jump to use the word I'm sorry, when there's really nothing that you're apologizing for. There's nothing that you did. So it's kind of a misuse of the word sorry. Find another way to match that emotion with them. Some of the things
Mhm.
that Michelle was talking about, right? So it's matching that feeling of frustration for them and that feeling of being left out. Like I can see that must be really difficult to feel that way.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. But to use that apology, there's really nothing for you to apologize for, right? So it's kind of a misuse of the apology, and that can be confusing for kids as well because it's like, well, why is mom apologizing? Why is dad apologizing? They really
Mhm.
didn't do anything wrong, right?
Yeah.
So, and
And
it's
the
and
purpose
it's
of
it's it's a common thing that people do, right?
Mhm. Yeah, you want to focus on those emotions, labeling their emotions. How does that make you feel? That sounds really frustrating. And then eventually they'll hopefully start opening up a little bit more. And the reason why we have these questions is because we want to help you understand that why won't they listen? One, are we listening to them and really hearing them? And two, is it about listening or is it that this is their perspective? They're struggling with doing the right thing, but it's not necessarily that they just, we just want to stop the behavior. We want to make it change.
Yeah.
And we have to dig a little bit deeper with some children that are a little more oppositional because there can be many different things that are resulting, right, in the
Yeah, I was
behavior.
saying too, like if you had a black and white thinker where they were getting caught up in that, no one ever does this, you could
Yeah.
challenge it a little bit deeper too, to kind of find out like, have you ever gotten the puck? Has there ever been a chance? Because you would want to try to challenge and look for a time when maybe there was an opportunity that maybe they did get the puck, to
Mhm.
try and look for those pieces where it did happen, so
Yeah.
that it's not just quite so rigid, right? What they're thinking.
So Sue had mentioned mad, sad, glad, and bad. Oh, it's good for a 2-year-old. Let's broaden the emotion. Emotion makes us act a certain way. So when a child, this will just help broaden that emotional vocabulary. So we're wanting you to label those emotions, trying to understand where the child is coming from. This broadens those the words that they can use. Even teenagers have a hard time with their emotions and labeling them. So let's label them for them. You're feeling frustrated. I could see that you felt lonely at recess time. That must have been really hard for you when you wanted to hang out with somebody. And emotion makes you act certain ways. So sometimes they're not listening because their emotion takes over. They're impulsive. Their brains are under construction until 25. And it just happens. They're not doing it on purpose. Emotion is a really strong force for us. Just like for us, when our child isn't listening, we can get triggered. We get frustrated. We're embarrassed because they're doing it in front of somebody else. Maybe we feel like this is silly. Why are you just listen to what I said? Don't run off. I told you to hold my hand. And we get frustrated, but the child's so excited that they just go, right? So it's not that they don't want to listen. It's just the emotion and the impulsivity and the brain and everything. It just happens. So being aware, and sometimes we have to give them a break and understand they're just little kids, right?
The emotion wheel, yeah, it's just on
So
Google.
the
You can
emotion
Google
wheel, you
that,
line.
and it's very easy to find. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you going to put it? You're putting in a link, right? I think, Louise. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. There's a link to the resource on the resource page. Yeah. Okay, so this goes hand in hand with what was said earlier, as well as my tone. Tone is really important. So really, I mean, communication is more than just our words. A lot of it is nonverbal. Um, and then there's that other piece, that body language and that tone, right? So I can say 5 more minutes, then it's time to go, or I can say 5 more minutes, then it's time to go.
Mhm.
It's a very different message. Children are feeding off of us. It's like when your teacher used to say, I have to talk to you about something. And we're like, oh, what does the teacher have to talk to us about? What is the tone like? What is their face like? Am I going to get in trouble? So children are picking up on these things. And when your nonverbal communication and your verbal communication do not match, that's where children are struggling to understand, especially when they're a little bit younger. So keeping that in mind as far as how am I communicating with my child? Because are they hearing me? If they're not hearing me because they're shutting down because of my tone or because I'm yelling, some children will do that. Some will shut down, some will act out more in response to us or to their teacher or whoever.
Okay, so we want to hear some of your thoughts about how you might handle some of these situations. So you walk into your child's room and there's a wet towel on the floor. How are you going to deal with that one?
Okay, you've told them not to drop it on the floor. It ruins the rug. This is a $50 towel that's just going to turn moldy. They're just not listening. So it's
Yep,
happening
been
on a
through
regular
this
basis. What are some of your
50
red
times. You've
flags?
told them over and
This would
over
be
and
the
over
issue.
again.
Mhm. So the concern here is that the child leaves the wet towel on the floor. Um, so what is the child thinking? So are you saying that the child is just like, whatever, it doesn't really matter. I'll leave it here. Eventually somebody will pick it up. That's what I'm getting from
Or
that
is mom
comment.
saying that she would leave the towel on the floor and they'll figure it out eventually? Or that the child would figure it out eventually to pick it up?
So the point behind this question is this is an issue. We've told the child you need to hang up your towel, yet it continues to be on the floor. So let's think about why. We're not asking the child why. We as adults are trying to figure out what's getting in the
Why is
way.
it
Is the
happening?
child not listening? Are they just being that way? Just they're being difficult? Or what else could be going on? So these are the questions we're asking you.
Think about the logistics.
So the child will figure it
Think
out.
about the logistics here. How far away is their hamper? Is there, a hook, but is the hook too high up for them to get their towel to? What's their routine? Like, you know, when they
Mhm.
take the towel off, is the basket near where they take the towel off? Or do they have to go somewhere else to put the towel? So, like, think about logistics.
Yeah. I mean, and do they care about the towel? Probably not. Do they get distracted? If you leave the towel there, are they just going to pick up that same towel or are they going to grab a new one? You have to really be around to make sure that they continue using that towel. And children will
Yeah.
pick up clothes out of a bin and smell it and wear it.
It has
It
to
doesn't
sniff
matter
test.
to them. Like, so what if it's a
Turn
little
it inside out.
stinky,
It's good
right?
to go.
Yeah. So the whole right?
I
You used to
remember
have
it
teenagers,
well.
you
I
remember,
do.
right? But this is the point say. Yeah. We are trying to, something is not happening in the home. The child refuses to, clean up that towel. What are the blocks? Like Sue said, where is the hamper? Is there a hook that they can hook it onto? Does the child get easily distracted? Are we following up with the child to make sure that they're doing that? Maybe we need to add a reward chart or a checklist that after a shower, do this, this, and this, and then you can go outside and play. And then you can watch your show. So this is what we're getting at is why is the behavior happening
So,
on a
and
regular
if you're,
basis,
if
right?
that's that reminder of that, they need help to hang it up, and you want them to be more independent, but where they need to hang it is in a location that they can't reach. If you happen to not be there at that moment,
Mm-hmm.
where's that towel going to land? It's going to land somewhere where it shouldn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you build that independence in a
Yeah.
way? Do we put a hook at a lower level so that they can have that independence and put it there without you having to have to do it for them, or without having to maybe do the prompt, because now it's at a level where they can do it themselves, or the basket is in a proximity that's closer to where when they're finished, it's right here, I put it in, or at least it's on top or close to it, right? If I have to go somewhere far away and I've distracted
Mm-hmm.
because I,
Yeah.
saw something out the window or heard a noise, chances are it's going to land somewhere else, right? Yes. Do you need help hanging the towel up? Maybe. But
Yeah.
again, if you're trying to build that independence and you want them to be able to do it for themselves, you want to be able to have things there for them to do it on their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that could be a proactive thing that, on a Saturday afternoon, I'm noticing that I'm picking up a lot of wet towels after you've left for school. This seems to be an issue. Um, what's getting in the way? Do you need help with the towel hook? Is it too hard for you to put it on, the holder? What do you
Lay
think
it
about
across the
putting the
tub,
hamper somewhere
right? Lay it
close?
across
What
the
do you
edge of the
think would
tub
help?
instead. Give them some options, right? That
Yeah,
are
sure.
closer, that are down to their level.
Yeah, ask them. Yeah. Ask them to bring the towel to me when
Yep,
they're done for the younger children.
yep.
Sure, if that's going to work for you. Absolutely. So these are the things that we're wanting you to kind of problem solve around those issues that come up on a regular basis. Is it that they're just not listening? They're just doing it just to be, bad kids. There's no such thing as bad kids, but you know what I mean? Like sometimes children get
They're
labeled as those kids
oppositional,
that just
right?
never listen. Well, is it that they're not listening? They're oppositional, or are there things that we can help them out with to
Well,
set
we
them up
often say,
for
right? They're not
success?
necessarily
Right?
wanting to give you a hard time, but they may be having a hard time, right? So what is it that
That's
they're
right.
having a hard time
Yeah,
with?
that's
And
right.
how can we
Yeah.
help them to be more independent,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you want to do a different
Sure.
one, Sue?
Let's do the bottom one. So homework time is always a struggle. And before Emily goes outside, she has to finish her homework. She hates math and she loves to hang out with her friends.
So is she just not listening, or what? What do you think? How can we get her to start doing her homework?
Hmm. Yeah, you can sit with them and offer to help.
Hmm. As long as this is something that they do want. And again, are we doing this in the moment? This is probably an ongoing issue. Homework is always a struggle. So again, asking, because some children maybe don't want your help right beside you. They want you in earshot. Um, yeah.
Were you even aware that they were having struggles with math?
So what's the motivator? Yeah. So digging a little bit deeper, I'm noticing homework is a struggle. You seem to want to sneak out when your friends come. Um, but I'm
Yep,
wondering
reward
what's going
positive
on.
behavior. Homework is done so she can play with her friends. Not sure how you would phrase that without sounding demanding.
Hmm.
So it could be a when then, right? So when you finish your homework, then you could go play with your
Hmm.
friends. So you could use a when then.
Yep. But if Yep. And if math is an issue, and you know that, then, like was suggested by the other parent, maybe sit with the child. Would you like me to sit close by? Is there something I can help you with? Do you feel like this is something we should talk to the teacher about? What part of it is hard?
Yeah.
And try to dig a little bit deeper because maybe it's not that they're just not listening. It's I'm struggling and I don't know how to do this. Is it that they won't do
And a
it or
lot of
they
kids really
can't do it? So
and a
again,
lot of
peeling
kids really
back the
struggle with
layer
asking for
a bit,
help,
right?
right? So you really need to be aware that they really struggle with
Yes.
asking
Yep.
for help from you as well as from teachers because they may feel
Hmm.
like they're stupid or they're disappointing their family or their caregivers,
Hmm.
and letting them down. Because if I can't do this, this says that I'm
Hmm.
stupid and I can't do it and everybody else can, right? So to ask questions says something about me.
Hmm. Yeah.
So asking for help is a very difficult task for
Hmm.
a lot of kids. So just be aware of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So these are some simple ideas so you can now look at your own issues that are coming up on a regular basis and kind of peel back the layers a little bit to say what possibly could be getting in the way, and why are they struggling with follow through. They may need more support, what's going on, and then how do we motivate them, right? So this child wants to go out and play with their friends, so that's the motivator, right?
So this is kind of some just sort of summary pieces too. So to encourage your child's cooperation, we talked about validating their struggle, paying attention to the efforts that they are making. It may not go well all the time, but you want to notice when they are putting that, sort of foot forward that they're making an effort, they're trying, right? So you want to notice their efforts and doing that planning ahead, right? So how can we, try and do something different next time? So the just like the towel, how can we try to put a plan in place? Same thing for the homework. If I notice that this is happening all the time, how can we try to put a plan in place for next time? And having those clear expectations about, and maybe you need to alter them a little bit about what your expectations are. Does it really meet where they're at? Is it fitting with their developmental level? Maybe you need to alter your expectations and be clear about what your expectations are, and really does it meet where they're at? And problem solve things out together, right? You're going to get far more buy-in from them if you're working at this together. And asking those questions like, I didn't notice and help me understand, are going to, get again, it's building that rapport, it's building that relationship between you, and it's strengthening that bond because they're like, yes, they get me, they're hearing me. So you're going to get far more value
Yeah.
in the relationship, and it's going to strengthen things.
Hmm. Yep, absolutely. When it comes to problem solving, this is the stuff that we've been talking about validating, empathy, um, and earlier we had talked about like a lot of people just want the behavior to stop. But if it was that easy, then we wouldn't be running parenting courses, would we? So you can't just get a behavior to stop. So we're really trying to figure out what is going on and let's work on this together, especially when you have a child that does push back a little bit, that's a little more stubborn or oppositional. You want all children involved, but especially children, like Sue said earlier, they want to feel heard. And when they feel heard, and this is a collaboration, we're working on this together, they're more likely to follow through. But if we just come home and say, we're going to do a reward chart, this is how we're doing it, this is what's going on, maybe a great idea, but this child is going to be like, wait a minute, I don't want to do this, or you didn't even ask me, you're just telling me what to do, and now I'm pushing back. So when you do your problem solving and you're asking questions, you're showing respect for a child's struggle, trying to put yourself in their shoes. Try not to ask too many questions and be careful of that, because that why question is actually a conversation blocker. It can project shame. So if I say, why would you do that? What I'm saying is you did it on purpose. And what I'm saying is you are a disappointment, right? And we don't mean to say those things, but that's where that why question comes from. And a lot of children will just shut down. They do the shoulder shrug. So you can ask questions, but be mindful of how you do it and try not to use the why question. But help me understand. I'm feeling a little bit stuck. What would be helpful? And then don't rush to answer questions. Sometimes asking them if they want apple juice or orange juice is a 5-minute decision. Asking what's going to be helpful, I actually don't know. Or this is the first time I've actually felt heard. I don't know what to do with this. Or the last time I shared with you how I felt, I actually got in trouble. So I'm not quite sure what I should say or what's going to happen. So just things to keep in mind, because children really want to do well, even though their behavior can be frustrating. And we tend to think if you don't want to get in trouble or if you want things to go well, then just listen, do as you're told. But children want to do well and they're not able to. So it's up to us to dig a little bit deeper. This is really hard to do. And we're doing this in a very short period of time. So it's going to be a lot of reflecting and looking at situations after taking this information home.
So again, punishment is something that we often tend to jump to, and it's a lot of times how we were raised. But we're hopefully going to help you switch that a little bit. So instead of punishment, we want you to show the child how to make amends. So instead of, what they can't do or what they shouldn't do, let's try and focus on what they can do instead. So looking for those other things. What are the things that they can do? What are the options, right? Look for the options. So instead of this, you can do this, right? If this still doesn't work, then you can use a when then, like I suggested. So when you finish your homework, then you can play with your friends. When you finish your dinner, then you can have some extra time on your Xbox. When you finish getting ready for bed, then we can have an extra story. When you finish your dinner, then you can have your dessert. Give your child a choice when you can have a choice be available to them, right? So we said earlier, don't give a choice when there isn't a choice to be had, but when you're able to offer a choice, offer a choice. You don't have to offer a gazillion choices, but offer a single choice where there's a choice that you can provide. And remove a privilege only as a very last resort. We see parents get caught up in this cycle, and it's like, oh, I took this away, and I took that away, and I took this away. And my kids now have basically nothing left in their room, and we still have the behavior issue. Because kids will ride out that storm with you. They will go the distance. So that is proven time and time again to not work. So try some of these other approaches, and you can truly try and resolve problems with your children and plan ahead if this is an ongoing issue, and have that conversation, like Michelle was saying, not in the moment, right? Have that conversation about, I notice and I'm seeing that this is
Mhm.
an ongoing struggle, and what can we do differently? And see if you can try and get that buy-in from them, right? If you're starting to notice and validate and, really comment on when things are going well, you're going to start to see those shifts. You're going to start to see the buy-in. Each one of these things, each of these tips and tools that we're giving you, they're not sort of like standalone things. They all kind of work together like a web, and you'll start to see that gradual shift with your children's behaviors over time, right? One will kind of lead into another. So you have to just start somewhere and just keep at it. Okay?
I think too, when a child isn't listening, we get resentful and it's just a no, right? Like lots of no's we're giving to them. So when you can substitute a yes, can you substitute a yes? Yes, later. Maybe give yourself some time to think, right? I'm not going to answer you right now. I need some time. Come on, mom, please, 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 please. You know, I just need some time. The more you ask, the longer I'm going to take, right? So giving choice. So you can push this or give me some time. Use a statement like convince me. I think some children, teaching negotiation is great. Some parents use that word manipulation a lot. And, is your child just trying to get what they want? Well, part of getting what they want is also there has to be a give and take. It's not just your way or the highway, right? So what are the alternatives? How can we work on this together? And help me understand how this is going to work, right? But I will listen to you. Now it's your turn to listen to me, and we're going to try to work this out together. So I'm not saying no, but I want to know how you think this is going to work. Because it could be something like, I want to go to bed later. And it's like, okay, so how is that going to happen? You feel like it's unfair that you go to bed so late and you're always fighting with us. Bedtime is now turned into an hour and a half. But what you're saying is that you want to let her later bedtime. So we're seeing that behavior and they really want a later bedtime. So how is this going to work? How are you going to get up in the morning? Um, you know, convince me. Let's talk about it. See where it goes. Let children make choices, praise their efforts,
There we
step
go.
back and lie. And this may be stressful for a parent, but it does work. You want to give them opportunity. Try not to do that helicopter parenting. Show them how to do things and then let them try things, right? So if the unhelpful statement is, you're fine, what can you say instead? The child wants to feel heard, so how can we help them feel heard?
Pretty good negotiators when they want to be.
Mm-hmm. That's a good skill to have.
It
If they
is.
can
See
shut
it as
down
a
all the
positive.
time, then they're gonna fight you. They're gonna fight you. Yeah, a lot of them are really bright. They have great ideas, but we're being rigid right back with them. So
Instead of seeing them as hostage negotiators, see it as something. They're going to be great lawyers one day.
so what can we say to help a child feel heard? Instead of you're fine, what can we say instead? I'm noticing you're really upset. You really wanted to stay at the park. The slide is so fun. The trouble is we have to go home. And actually, the trouble is we have to go home. You
Hmm.
actually don't have to add that piece. I would just
Yeah,
actually
you
leave
don't
it
even
out.
have to.
right? Yeah. So, and then we just start moving towards, the car or walking home. That extra piece you may not even have to add, but that was fantastic.
That was really
And
good.
yeah, I'm noticing you
Yeah, time.
to stay. Oh my goodness, to stay.
You stuck?
Let me know if I can help. I can type if you like.
That's okay. We're just going to do the one, but
Okay.
okay. So everybody's getting the idea. I'm just noticing the time. But we want that child to feel heard. We don't need to jump in and fix, and they're more likely to listen because we're not getting into all this talking, right? And trying to convince them. It just really sucks. Yeah, but we're going home.
I
There's
was
some
sharing with Michelle that my granddaughter was having such a terrible time with Halloween. This was really like her first big Halloween, and was melting down and having such a hard time having to wait, and we basically went through this process, and it was like, it's really hard, isn't it, having to wait. And she was like looking out the window and she's like, yes, Nanny, it is hard. And it's like, do you see any other kids out there yet? No, not yet. So like we just kind of went with it, right? Went with the emotion and validated how hard it was to have to wait. And then she was able to kind of bring it down a little bit. And it wasn't that she was still heartbroken that she couldn't go out for the candy quite yet and that she had to wait for so long. But it was just a matter of being present with her and being there with that emotion. So just try and shift that perspective a little bit with your kids, and you'll see that things will start to smooth out a little bit. It's going to take time. Sometimes kids will amp up their behavior. I'm going to say that they will sometimes amp up their behavior because they're like, oh, they're trying something new, are they? Let's see if we can just try something to shift our behavior a little bit and give them a run for their money. So sometimes kids
Mhm.
will do that. They'll crank it up a little bit, but you have to hold your course. And then they'll start to realize that, okay, things have changed at home, and caregivers are doing something different, and we're trying something new. And I kind of like this. This feels okay, and it feels good, and it feels good to me too. So you've got to kind of go with it and ride it.
Yeah. And the last one there, we need to leave now, but we can come back another time. And then we're going to
Love that.
plan to the whining and complaining. That's maybe where we can
Yes.
validate, well, you really love the park and let's move forward, right? So these are those kinds of examples depending on your child. Sometimes we're doing more validating. Sometimes we just have to be clear, keep it simple, and let's move on to the next thing. Eventually they will calm down. So it's really looking at your child to say, how much validation does this child need? How much planning ahead? Or do I just need to be consistent, watch my messaging? Am I giving a choice? Am I being clear? Because is it that the child needs to be set up for success a little bit more, or is this child need a little more support? Because we really don't know why they're not listening, and we have to talk to them to figure out what their triggers are and what's going on and plan ahead. It's really
Yeah.
hard, and every child in your household could need something very different. So just take it one step at a time. So if you have any
Hope this
questions,
was helpful, everyone.
just put them in, and then if not, you can exit out.
Yeah, and you'll have access to the resource page that Louise will